Alain Delon is a name that carries both admiration and controversy. For many people in Europe and across the world, he is remembered as one of the most handsome and talented actors of the 20th century. His face became a symbol of French cinema, and his style influenced generations of actors and filmmakers. Yet, behind the charm and glamour, his life was filled with scandals, mysteries, and unanswered questions. Over the decades, Delon moved between two extremes. On one side, he was the adored screen idol who worked with some of the greatest directors in Europe. On the other, he was the man dragged into police investigations, accused of having connections with dangerous circles, and haunted by family disputes. At 88 years old, Delon carries the weight of both glory and suspicion. What makes his story even more fascinating is the idea that he has kept secrets for most of his life, secrets about love, fatherhood, and even crime. To understand why his name still divides opinions today, one must look back at his childhood, his rise to stardom, and the personal choices that shaped his destiny. This article will take you through his life, step by step, from the difficult days of his youth to the highest peaks of his career, and finally, to the quiet yet mysterious years of his old age. In the end, you will see how light and darkness were never separate in Delon's journey, and how the truth he carried remains a matter of speculation even today. Alain Delon is one of the most famous actors in European cinema history. For decades, his name has stood as a symbol of charm, talent, and mystery. He was not only admired for his striking looks, but also for his ability to portray complex characters on screen. However, his life was not only about art and fame. Behind the camera, Delon was surrounded by scandals, rumors, and controversies that often overshadowed his achievements. Some people saw him as a genius actor who shaped French cinema, while others considered him a troubled man whose personal life was full of problems. At 88 years old, Delon still carries this double image. His journey is not just the story of a movie star, but also of a man who faced poverty, discipline, rebellion, and painful family issues. It is also the story of secrets about love, betrayal, crime, and even death that followed him throughout his career. Many of these secrets have never been completely solved, leaving the public to wonder what was true and what was only rumor. To understand Delon's life, one must look at the beginning, his troubled childhood, the lack of family warmth, and the experiences that shaped him into the man he became. Only then can we understand how he transformed from a lost teenager into one of the greatest stars of French cinema, and why his life remains both inspiring and controversial even today. Alain Delon was born on November 8, 1935, in Sceaux, a small town on the outskirts of Paris. His family was middle class. His father, François-Fabien Delon, worked as a cinema projectionist, while his mother, Edith Arnold, was a pharmacy assistant. When Alain was only 4 years old, his parents divorced, leaving him in a life of instability. He was often passed from one home to another, sometimes living with his father, sometimes with his mother, and for a period with foster parents near a prison. This unstable environment shaped his personality from a very young age. When he was 10 years old, Alain witnessed the execution of Pierre Laval, the former Prime Minister of France during the Vichy regime. This violent and shocking event left a deep mark on his young mind. Throughout his childhood, he was seen as a rebellious and difficult child. He was sent to many different schools, including religious ones, but was expelled several times for bad behavior. Although he once showed talent in singing and even received praise from a future pope, his stubbornness and refusal to follow rules made education impossible. By the time he was a teenager, he was already disconnected from his parents and drifting into a life of trouble. At 14, he ran away from home, trying to escape discipline, but was soon caught and brought back. His stepfather later forced him to work in a butcher shop, where he spent 3 years dealing with knives, blood, and slaughtered animals. This experience left him with dark memories and reinforced his restless, rebellious nature. At 17, Alain Delon joined the French Navy, hoping to find a new path. He was sent to serve in Saigon during the Indochina War. However, instead of bringing discipline, the military revealed more of his rebellious side. He was arrested several times for stealing vehicles, driving without a license, and disobeying orders. Eventually, he was imprisoned and even spent his 20th birthday in a military jail. His military record described him as uncontrollable and violent, someone who refused to accept authority. He often tried to escape from his unit and was punished by having his head shaved, something he later described as a humiliation. These years hardened him, but also deepened his hatred of control. In 1956, he was discharged dishonorably from the Navy. By then, he had no diploma, no profession, and a bad reputation. Back in Paris, he found himself without direction. He took small jobs carrying goods at the market, waiting tables in restaurants, but he was always close to falling back into street life. This was the darkest moment of his youth, when it seemed like his life would end in failure. Yet, destiny had something else in store. A chance meeting with people connected to cinema would soon change everything and lead him toward an unexpected career in film. This transformation was not immediate, but it marked the beginning of one of the most fascinating journeys in European cinema. Delon's entry into the world of cinema was almost accidental. In 1957, he met actress Brigitte Aubert, who introduced him to artistic circles in Paris. She even took him to the Cannes Film Festival, where his handsome looks immediately caught attention. Hollywood agents offered him contracts if he agreed to learn English and change his name, but Delon refused. He wanted to stay true to his identity and build his career in France. His first small roles soon followed, and in 1958 he acted in the film Christine, alongside Romy Schneider. At first, Romy was unimpressed by him, but their on-screen chemistry turned into a real love affair. Their romance became one of the most famous in French cinema, with the press constantly following them. Delon later said that Romy was the only woman who truly loved him for who he was, not for his fame. Professionally, he was also rising. In 1960, he played Tom Ripley in Purple Noon, based on Patricia Highsmith's novel. This role made him an international star. His cold, magnetic performance fascinated audiences, and his career took off. He became known for his beauty, but also for a darker, mysterious aura that made him perfect for roles of criminals and anti-heroes. However, just as his professional life was reaching the peak, his personal life was about to take a complicated turn. During the early 1960s, Delon had a brief relationship with Nico, a German singer and model who later became part of the Velvet Underground. In 1962, she gave birth to a boy named Ari. The child was later raised by Delon's mother, who adopted him legally and gave him the name Christian Aaron Boulogne. For decades, Delon refused to admit that Christian was his son. This denial created a deep wound in the boy's life. Christian grew up struggling with drugs and identity issues, often seeking his father's acknowledgement, but never receiving it. He later said in interviews, "I don't need money, I only need my father to acknowledge me." These words showed the pain of a son left in the shadows. Meanwhile, Delon continued to build a family with other partners and openly acknowledged his other children. This difference created bitterness and a permanent fracture in his family story. Even in later years, when Delon prepared his will, Christian was not recognized. The secret of this denied son became one of the most controversial aspects of Delon's life, something that the public never forgot. If the denied child brought personal scandal, the next event brought Delon into the world of crime and politics. In 1968, his former bodyguard, Stephen Markovic, was found dead near Paris. The case became one of the most sensational scandals in French history. Rumors spread that Markovic had photographs from private parties involving famous politicians and celebrities, and that blackmail was involved. Delon was called for questioning because of his close ties to Markovic. The French press exploded with headlines linking the movie star to mafia networks and political corruption. Although Delon was never convicted, his name was forever tied to the case. For a while, his international career suffered, especially in Hollywood. The scandal turned him into both a public fascination and a target of suspicion. People were no longer sure whether he was only an actor playing gangsters on screen, or a man living too close to the criminal world in real life. Despite the scandals, Delon managed to rebuild his image through European cinema. In 1970, he starred in La Cercle Rouge, directed by Jean-Pierre Melville, a classic noir film that became a huge success. He then appeared in Borsellino, alongside Jean-Paul Belmondo, another major French star. These films established him as the ultimate face of the cool gangster, blending elegance with danger. In 1976, he delivered one of his most powerful performances in Mr. Klein, a film that explored identity and persecution during World War II. Critics considered it one of his best works. By the mid-1970s, Delon had transformed from a romantic idol into a respected actor with serious artistic achievements. Yet, his reputation was still marked by scandals. The Markovic affair was never completely solved, and his denial of his son Christian continued to haunt him. Even so, audiences could not resist his screen presence, and he remained one of the biggest stars in Europe. As he grew older, Delon's career slowed, but his public image continued to provoke debate. In 2019, at the Cannes Film Festival, he received an honorary Palme d'Or for his lifetime contribution to cinema. While many celebrated him, others protested, pointing to his controversial remarks and political views. The event showed how divided the public remained about him. Was he a legend of cinema, or a man whose personal flaws could not be ignored? In his private life, Delon withdrew more and more into solitude. He lived in his villa with his beloved dogs, describing them as his true companions. He often spoke openly about death, even expressing his wish for assisted euthanasia in Switzerland, where it is legal. This desire shocked many, but also reflected his honesty about aging and control over his own life. He wanted to face death on his own terms, just as he had faced life. Even in his old age, Delon never fully revealed all his secrets. The denied son, the unresolved Markovic case, and the many rumors of his personal life remained topics of speculation. To the end, he kept silence about some questions that the public wanted answered. His life was full of contradictions, success and scandal, love and rejection, elegance and violence. At 88 years old, Alain Delon remains a figure who fascinates, because he represents both the beauty and the darkness of fame. His story shows that legends are never simple. They are built on both achievements and mysteries. For his fans, he will always be remembered as the man who brought unforgettable characters to the screen. For others, he will remain a symbol of unanswered questions. The ultimate truth of his well-kept secret is something only Delon himself knows, and perhaps something he has taken with him as part of the myth that surrounds his name.